Hey guys, so this one's a little bit off topic, but I think it's still kind of relevant. It's to do with learning Japanese or learning a second language, which is something actually a lot of people in the world are bilingual, but in larger, excuse me, in larger countries like China or United States, Canada, etc., it's not quite as necessary. Excuse me. And I should also say probably in South America as well, where most people speak Spanish. So there's this great website. It's called Quora.com. You've probably heard of it, so forgive me for mentioning it if you have, or acting like whatever. If you haven't, it's really worth taking a look at. You can ask basically any kind of question and get answers from people who very often are involved with the subject you're asking about. So, for example, if you have a question about being a movie star or how to build a house or whatever, you can post your question and then before you submit it, you can request an answer from people who are involved with the subject. It seems to be a pretty amazing algorithm for sorting everything. So anyways, so from my account, I've got a few questions here. What are 5 ways to speed up the language learning process? How many hours a day do you dedicate to learning a new language? How much time should I spend every day learning a new language? There's some of them are just likes about passive. Anyways, why does the Japanese language have Chinese characters? And then some grammatical questions about the Japanese. So suffice to say, a lot of people are curious about how you do it. So, and a lot of them are very often looking for kind of shortcuts or some kind of information about what is the right approach. And I've noticed there's some parallels between this, learning Japanese, and my own experience in learning software development. And really, it's a matter of exposure. It's not that exciting or fun. It's just a matter of being able to focus your mind on exactly what's in front of you very, very often. An hour a day is pretty helpful. Of course, the more the better. But you need to understand that really what it takes, it's just the grind. So if you were like starting from zero and knew no Japanese, and you wanted to be proficient in say 2 years, which is a pretty good timeline if you're really serious. Or let's just throw that out the window. Let's just say you wanted to be proficient someday, because it can be a mistake to put a time limit on yourself. First, you should really, really learn the kana. Hiragana is the most useful, probably, and then katakana, which are the exact same sounds, just different characters. Don't ask me why. Okay. Generally, katakana is used for foreign loan words, so any kind of wasei ego, which is basically means Japanified Western words, will be written with katakana. So the nice part is that once you know hiragana, you know Japanese pronunciation. That's it. There are no words in Japanese with pronunciation outside the kana. So that can make learning new words and kanji down the road much, much easier. Japanese, I believe, has 19 unique sounds, or phonemes as they're called. English has 46. And there are languages with more. Some of the Chinese dialects are like off the chart, but the kana will really help tie your pronunciation down very well. And then there's it's called furigana, which it's usually written above or below kanji characters, so that you can know their pronunciation. Kanji's the next level. It's intimidating, and a lot of people kind of get scared off by it. But the fact is, I don't know, at least 90% of the people in the country, probably more, use it all the time. So it's something to maybe keep in your hat until you feel ready. But it's not that difficult. It's just initially kind of scary. So once you know the kana, you can progress into the grammar and vocabulary pretty quickly. I would really, really recommend, probably the most efficient way is to start working through textbooks for the JLPT, which in English is called the Japanese Language Proficiency Test. In Japanese, it's called the Nihongo no Ryoku Shiken, which means the Japanese kind of brain strength test. Kanji can have really funny translations. I recommend that because, in my experience and all my searching and studying, that seems to be the most well organized, kind of targeted system for learning the language. They've got 5 levels. It's always good to just be humble and start at the beginning. We can work through it pretty quickly and get a good understanding of the language. And probably one thing that really trips people up the most about Japanese is the grammar. As I've said, the pronunciation is relatively simple, although a lot of English speakers struggle with it because it is so clear. You have to say the sounds exactly. They're simple sounds, but if you mess them up, Japanese people may not understand you, or sometimes they just get upset and pretend not to. It's kind of annoying to listen to, really. So be careful with that. Aka, satana, hama, yawara, and then a, I, u, e, o. That's it, in combinations of those sounds. Oh, there's also the sound, which is like a weird, they use it for direct objects, but it's not that hard. The grammar is really, really tricky, and some people say like, oh, it's just the opposite of English. It's not quite true. It's kind of a mix. It's almost like it's about like 80% opposite. So if Japanese is 1, 2, 3, 4, sorry, if English is 1, 2, 3, 4, like hello, how are you today? Japanese is like 1, 1, 4, 3, 2. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's really, really different. So you need to get used to formulating what you want to say in English and then rearranging it in your head into Japanese and then saying it. That's kind of just how it is. Once you get used to functioning in Japanese, that goes away for the most part, unless it's a really difficult subject. There are certain sentences in English that are really, really hard to say in Japanese just because of all the structure of the grammar, like adjectival clauses and verbs and stuff. Sometimes it doesn't quite line up as you would like in Japanese, so sometimes you kind of have to give up on being eloquent and completely translating every little nuance into Japanese and simply just saying it simply in Japanese, you know. It's humbling, yeah. It does make you feel sometimes like a big child, like you can't communicate. And it's important though to kind of realize like what you're actually doing. You know, you're making progress and you're learning a second language, and it's happening. That's really, really important. You need those. Oh, sorry, I keep saying ambulance. It's a tiny little road next to me, but it's one of the only roads in the area that goes completely through the neighborhood. All the other ones that kind of stop and wind, and it's just a mess. So quite a bit of traffic. So small wins along the way are really, really important. It's usually not a good idea to compare your ability to others. There's always going to be somebody better than you, and there's going to be people who are just starting out and aren't as good as you. In either case, you should just take it as it is. You know, if someone's way ahead of you, they probably put a lot more time and energy into it, and they may also have a bigger need for it. So, for example, someone like me, I run my own business in Japanese. I'd better have good Japanese, right? It's nothing to be proud of or arrogant about. It's like, if you don't have it, what are you doing, you know? And then people who are just starting out, you know, maybe they're only here for a year and they just kind of want to go around and see some famous sites and be able to say hello and kind of have a bit of fun learning it, you know? It's important to just focus on your path and be inspired by people who are better than you, and be supportive of people who are not as good as you. Anything else is kind of, I don't know, just has the potential to not work out very well. So some small wins can be things like, you know, learning the kana and being able to read them when you see them around town, assuming you're in Japan, or in your textbook if you're not. That was a cool experience for me. My father-in-law actually, he made me study the kana from these dollar store books, the equivalent of a Japanese dollar store book. They're 100 yen shops, 100 yen shop. And I was so resistant, you know, I was really kind of struggling emotionally being in this new country. It was winter time. I didn't have any friends, know anybody, no job. way too much time to myself, no money. So I kind of just dealt with it, and then um, as time passed, I kind of integrated it, and things became a little bit easier. And then I was riding the bike around town, and I realized I could actually read the kana, and then it'd be like 3 or 4 kana, and then this mess of kanji. I was just like, like my eyes would just skip over it. But that's a small win. You realize you're making progress. Other small wins can be things like ordering a coffee out, or ordering a meal, or maybe asking where something is and understanding the answer, going shopping by yourself, asking about prices, and so on and so forth. And gradually, it accumulates to bigger and bigger things where you realize, like, I just spoke with someone for like an hour in Japanese, and the same applies also to writing. You can, these days with computers and smartphones, you don't have to worry so much about the difficulty of writing kanji. Instead, it's just more about being able to read it. And there's all kinds of apps now for translation and whatnot, and in both ways. My favorite is Emiwa, which is for currently I think it's only on iOS, which is a shame. But there's no shortage of other options for Android or whatever else is out there these days. And so it's really not about like how much time it's going to take, or what's the best way. I mean, there are certain textbooks that are better than others, and if you have the time, it can be really helpful to go to an intensive course or something. But the real trick is to just keep working at it and keep improving, and just drill into problems or issues that you don't understand until you do, and then it'll get better. I've experienced a lot of the same issues learning software development, and it's just something you have to deal with. Our brains, neurologically, the way they're laid out, they've literally evolved to adapt to, and also in adapting to make what was challenging easier, and our bodies too. Like for example, so I've been off of running for the past. I think I took a good 2 or 3 months off, which was a big mistake. I was focusing on other things, and I checked this fitness tracker on my phone. I was like, whoa, it's been like 3 months. I haven't been out, so I'll just go for a run, And naturally, I was so out of shape, like so heavy and slow. I kept having to walk and stop, and this is embarrassing, But you just do it, get through it. Maybe take the next day off to recover. Then the next day, go out and do it again, And maybe it's just as hard. It might be slightly easier, or you might finish a little faster, but you're still kind of just wrecked. Rest, go do it again. Rest, go do it again, and then sooner or later you're back to where you were, and it's not as hard. You can run past the spot. I remember when I was like totally out of breath and about to fall over. It's true mentally as well. What's really helpful, I think, and people tend to overlook sometimes, is the goal. Like, what are you learning it for? What are you going to use it for? And so in terms of exercise, the goal can be, looking and feeling really good, having more energy. Being out of shape just robs you of your energy, and a lot of times you don't even notice it. You're just tired all the time, but you think, okay, if I go work through this, painful process of pushing my body, and then if I let it rest, I'm gonna feel a lot better, a lot stronger. And then in the case of language, the real use is being able to communicate with people. So for me, I wanted to be able to run a business by myself with no BS and no unnecessary risk or responsibilities, like employing someone full time and wondering if I'd be able to afford to live after that. So in that case, sorry, keep putting this up. There was a very strong need for it. It's true with a lot of things. Martial arts, if you grow up in a violent neighborhood and you feel like if you can't protect yourself, you're going to be in a really bad situation, you're naturally going to train a lot more seriously and develop a lot more skill. And on top of that, also having a community can be really, really helpful. So in the case of any type of competitive sports or any type of difficult, challenging skill, if you see people around you doing well, they can really lift you up. You know, they can inspire you, and they can um, help you just stop focusing on smaller issues and focus more on the big picture, like how this is actually used. And before you know it, it becomes easy. I experienced that in a really real way when I was studying Aikido. There's a tradition where they just make you practice these very simple forms with each other in very, very detailed ways and make you focus on weird points, like where your arms are and where you're grabbing. And it's not full force, and it's kind of, you have this feeling of kind of being like in the middle of something you don't really understand. And that carried on for a few years. I just couldn't quite understand like how to do it with my body, you know. But then I had the fortune to train with these two younger guys who'd been doing it. One of them, he'd been at it since he was in, like, I think year one in elementary school, and then the other guy had been at it. He trained like 5-6 hours a day, starting in university, and I think he was near his 10th year of training or something. And so I got on the mat with them, and we trained together, and they were doing all the same forms, but they were doing them like full speed in real time, and suddenly it just clicked. Like it was so much easier to understand. And from that day forward, I was a lot better because I just finally was like, okay, now we're actually using it. This is how it feels. This is what it looks like. All those details are important, but it's really about the bigger picture of how you're using it and what you're doing with it, what the results are, instead of just focusing on all the little details that generate that. So that's my answer. Whether it's learning a language or software development or martial arts or painting or whatever, it's just about continuous, prolonged exposure and effort over time, and the desire to keep improving, and the willingness and honesty to face your weak points and your shortcomings, and to be willing to fix them so that you know you're doing what you're doing properly, you know, that you're actually good at it. You want to get to that point. So I hope that's helpful. All right. Hopefully the sound is on. I didn't check.